Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code ONEFREEPP for a free single card today.
Good Saturday of racing out at Churchill Downs. 5 stakes races on the card. A couple of races where you'll have Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks points on the line. David Aragona, Gino Buccola, ready to preview one of those races for you. It's going to be race number 7 at Churchill on Saturday. It's the Grade 2 Locust Grove. Before we get into that race, do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel right below, throw up a like, throw the thumbs up. That's a big help for us. David, let's take a look at the field for race number 7 on Saturday at Churchill Downs. So you have the older fillies and mares here that are kind of a cut below the top tiers of the Idiomatics and Raging Seas, probably randomized in that group. And a lot of these horses have faced those foes, but they're not quite at that level. It feels like a pretty evenly matched group. We can understand why Shotgun Hottie, who's done the most, probably the most accomplished in here, she'll get a lot of money, but she's by no means like head and shoulders above the rest of this group.
No, she's not. I mean, she's a horse who seemed like she was on the rise to maybe be one of the best of this division last year before going to the sidelines, and she's still trying to work her way back to that status this year. She definitely is the horse to beat in this race off the strength of some of her recent results. But aside from one standout Beyer speed figure, she's not exactly having a huge edge on this field from a figure standpoint.
Exactly. If you're just looking at speed figures and you look at the last 6 or 7 of her races, only really one of them is head and shoulders above the rest. And the others are all right in the mix with a lot of these other rivals and the figures that they have been running. So let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector, see what our friends at Timeform US think about the way it shapes up. And it doesn't really look like there's that much early speed in here, David, with Loved as a horse who's shown speed. And then you have Pigalle, who I'm expecting to be more forwardly placed in here. She had shown that earlier on in her career and then was a little bit behind horses and kind of trapped in some traffic last time out. But I think those two will probably be the most forward, as Timeform US suggests.
Yeah, I think they are the 2 fastest in this race. Loved, I think, breaking well is going to be critical for her because that was a problem in her most recent start when she didn't make the front end. Pigalle, like you said, she does have more speed than she showed in her last start. Maybe one other horse that I would add to this mix that we'll talk about imminently is the number 1, Musical Mischief, who, having drawn the rail, being a horse who has shown speed in the past, I wonder if Edgar Morales is going to feel some incentive to send her to secure that inside position.
She's gotten more tactical and kind of more mature as she's gotten older, but Hoosier Philly is a horse who used to be big speed early on in her career. That's where she wanted to be, but she's changed a little bit with her tactics. Let's get through the field and we'll start to the inside with Musical Mischief. Bobby, producer, we all had a big laugh about Musical Mischief as we started this one. But David, Musical Mischief, as far as her chances in here, she's just going to need to turn the tables on a couple of the main rivals, like Shotgun Hottie, who got the better of her a couple starts back, like Pigalle. She is grade 1 placed on the dirt, and she does own a couple wins on the Churchill Down main track. So some positives for her there.
Yeah, I mean, when you start to look through this field and are just kind of glancing over the speed figures, at first glance, Musical Mischief looks like she fits pretty well with her 90 Beyer and a couple of high 80s to go along with it, but she earned that 90 in the Allaire du Pont, which is the same race where Shotgun Hottie got her 99 Beyer this year. We'll talk about it when we get there. I think that's a figure that maybe you want to regard with a little bit of skepticism, and when you do, you start looking at Musical Mischief's other races, and I didn't see the excuse for her last time in the Groupie Doll. She got a pretty good trip that day. The pace was moderate, and she just couldn't really see it out at the end. So I think she's going to have to run better here.
We have a very cool Louisiana bred coming up next. That's Free Like a Girl, who is 6-time graded stakes placed. This is an 18-time winner who already has raced 41 times. And we actually have a replay of her most recent race. This was winning the pink ribbon. She sat a pretty nice trip this day, David. She sat 3rd within 2 lengths, like always traveling well around the track here.
Yeah, it really was a perfect trip. I mean, she was on the rail, which is where you want to be at Charlestown for most of her trip before swinging out at the top of the stretch, like you just saw to run down the leader, clearly unhinged, who was a pretty nice sprinter. Probably had some trouble getting the extra furlong that day, but Free Like a Girl was able to reel her in. And Free Like a Girl is a horse that probably wants to go a little further than the 7 furlongs, which she's going to get to do here. She's run respectably against some tougher company in spots like the Apple Blossom and the Fleur de Lis. But it does feel like she is a decided cut below some of those top runners in the division. She's not facing them here. We'll see if she can earn another victory as this Louisiana bred and open company.
Grade 2 winner Taxed is up next. Finished 5th last time out. The race at Ellis Park, I thought kind of two things about it. She's inside, she's just behind the leader, she doesn't have a whole lot of room, and then it opens up. And when she tries to move through, she doesn't really quicken. It was a bit tight. I initially thought, she didn't get through. Then I watched it again. I went back and forth a couple different times. Like, did she have trouble or was it her own fault? And I really wasn't sure what to think, David. She probably needs to get a little bit faster in here, though, to get the better of this group and a couple of the others. So she seems to me like another one that she's fine. She's in the mix here. I wouldn't be shocked to see her run well. I probably want a little better price than I'm going to get on her in here, though, for her chances of winning this race. Where do you think Tax stacks up?
Yeah, I kind of went through the same thought process as you watching the groupie doll last time. It didn't look like she really wanted to go through that hole down towards the rail. I still wanted to see her show a little more fight to the finish that day. I thought her race two back in the Fleur de Lis over this track was actually pretty good. She was with the pace that day, and the pace was pretty moderate. And I think that kind of carried her along to hold on for third at the end. But it still was what I think is the best effort she's put forth since returning as a 4-year-old. As you were alluding to, I still have wanted to see her get a little faster than she was as a 3-year-old. And it doesn't seem like she's taken that step forward. So I wonder how much upside is here.
The number 4, Loved, was the horse that Timeform US had on the front end here. And Love actually showed us a little bit of a new dimension in her most recent race because she did not have a good start, David, and she was able to sit off the pace a little bit and pass horses. So it's always nice to see when a runner is able to do that. But in here, I think they'll probably hope for a clean start and expect to be on the lead if she gets out of the gate quickly.
Yeah, she's definitely had success going to the front in the past, so I would imagine if she breaks cleanly, they're going to want to get back to those tactics. And like you said, it was nice to see her adapt to a stalking style last time out of necessity after not breaking well, but she was beating an inferior field to the one that she's going to face here. I mean, I know third place finisher Hidden Connection has some credentials in her past. It kind of feels like that rival is off form, and some of the others that were competing in the race just aren't really on the level of what she's facing in this spot. She's run some big speed figures in the past, but she feels like a horse that wants to sort of boss around inferior competition, and she hasn't.
I called her a bully.
Yeah, she hasn't really been able to stand up to a challenge the couple of times that she's faced one in the Molly Pitcher and the Double Dog Dare. So I wonder how she's going to do when they come to challenge her at the top of the stretch in this race.
Yeah, horses like her with her running style too, when they face inferior competition, they can really put them away and draw off and look even a little more impressive sometimes. I just need to see her in an acid test like this. I want to see her be more competitive against a group like this. I thought Pigalle was really impressive last time out, David, at Ellis, and she's a horse that's just continued to step up the class ladder. She was a horse that was a maiden 30 claiming winner, and then they put her in some starter allowance spots, and every time they've stepped her up, she's just been really competitive. She has a race where she faced the boys, and if you eliminate that, you really don't have much wrong with what she's been doing. She's sharp. She could be sitting very close to the front end in here, but she also showed us last time out that when she had to come from behind, she was kind of in between horses, had nowhere to go, and then she had to angle all the way around to the outside and was able to get up late. So visually, I thought that was pretty impressive, and I just like her heading in the right direction. I think sometimes we kind of forget that when horses show up and win, it really is important. I'm a trip player. I know you are too. We're always looking for horses that maybe got stuck in some traffic, but she gets the job done quite a bit in, half of her lifetime start. So I think she fits pretty well in here.
Yeah, I mean, she's an admirable runner. She's been well managed by the connections, clearly, to have the success that she's had. And you look initially at that 23-1 upset in the groupie doll and say to yourself, well, where did that come from? Because she hadn't looked like she was that class prior to it. But I mean, she had only had 2 races since November of last year. So maybe she's just really taken a step forward in that time that she was away. The trip last time was interesting. It didn't seem like she was happy being behind horses early because she was pulling and she got ranked in the early stages. And typically when you see horses fighting with their rider like that, they're not able to produce the kind of finish that she did. So I think that's all positive for her. I do think her natural running style is to go forward, though. So I would think that they would want to follow Loved into the race and maybe get a stalking trip. She does have a little bit of a last time was the time feel to me, but she might be just a horse that's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think it just comes down to some of her opponents and rivals in here. Like, there's just nobody that's all that terrifying, and
Mhm.
she's kind of moving in the right direction right now. Corningstone, big long shot to the outside of Pigalle. She comes off of a third place finish in a stakes race over at Thistledown when she was the heavy favorite that day. We have seen her defeated by Free Like a Girl. Can you make a case for her in here?
I mean, I admire her consistency. It seems like she always shows up and runs that buyer in the low 80s or the high 70s. I just don't think that's quite good enough to get it done against this field. And she feels like a horse that's more of a candidate for a minor award.
Shotgun Hottie, probably the horse to beat in here. Millionaire, grade 3 winner. We've seen the highest ceiling from her of any of the horses in this race. And when you just look at her recent losses, David, losing to Raging Sea, who came back to win the grade 1 personal ensign, losing to Scylla, multiple graded stakes winner this year, and Adair Manor, who's one of the top in the filly and mare division. So any of those horses in a field like this would be a heavy, heavy favorite. So looking at the foes that she's faced and right here, seeing Shotgun Hottie competing with them, I think she is, a horse that will be in the mix here and probably one they all have to hold off.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you just look at her company lines recently, she does appear to be the classiest filly coming into this race. Raging Sea coming back to win the Grade One next time, albeit with a very favorable setup. But then facing the horses that she did in the Fleur de Lis, where I know some trip handicappers felt that she was the best horse that day in a roughly run stretch drive. I personally didn't think it was as terrible of as a trip as some have made it out to be. She was in tight along the inside, trying to squeeze through, and she was intimidated for about a 16th of a mile, but she ultimately secured that path and had her chance in the late stages. Just couldn't quite get to Scylla at the end of that race. She's got that 99 buyer that kind of jumps off the page in the Allaire DuPont. We talked about it with regard to Musical Mischief. You look through that field, the number just seems a little high for those
Yeah.
runners. So I kind of regard her as more of that horse that tops out at a 90, at least this year. If she gets back to the form that we saw from her in the Molly Pitcher last year, she's going to beat this field. But I haven't seen that mare since she's turned 5. So she's the horse to beat in this race, but I wouldn't want to go too low with regard to price.
The outside Hoosier Philly grade 2 winner was very precocious, won her first 3 starts. Since then, she hasn't been as much of a winner. They tried turf last time out, but a real key factor for her, David, this horse loves Churchill Downs, and she'll have an opportunity to get back to Churchill Downs, where we've seen her always show up with her best efforts. So Hoosier Philly drawn to the outside. How do you think she fits with this group?
Yeah, I think you have to dig through her form a little bit because it looks like she is just wildly inconsistent at first glance. It hasn't really gone on since her 2-year-old season when she attracted so much hype off those first 3 victories. But when she's been in spots where she's appropriately placed, I think she's actually run fairly well. I mean, look, she had no chance in the Breeders' Cup Distaff last year, and she's not a turf horse. So, I mean, you can kind of throw out 2 of her last 5 efforts. And her 6 furlong return was clearly just a prep to stretch out at Oaklawn Park earlier this year. I thought she was visually impressive, albeit against weaker 3 back when she won that Dig a Diamond Stakes. And I mean, her Shawnee 2 back, it was not a bad effort behind some really nice runners like Scylla, Kijera, Wet Paint, horses that would be vying for favoritism in here. And I thought she held her own that day. And I could just see her getting a pretty good trip following some of those pace rivals to her inside into the race, stalking from the second flight. I think she's going to be positioned to run a good race in here. And maybe she's finally going to be a fair price because she's a horse that's taken a lot of money off reputation early in her career. And I think having gained some distance since that 2-year-old season, we might get somewhere like 5, 6, 7 to 1 on her.
As we take a look at the selections for race number 7, I think we had similar approaches in here where I trust Shotgun Hottie. Free Like a Girl is very honest, but they're not exciting betting prospects at the prices they'll be, right? I don't want to play those horses at 3 to 1 or 2 to 1 or 8 to 5 or something in that range because I just don't think they're that much better than the rest of this field. So from a value-based standpoint, we're looking for horses that are kind of in that same range. You're going to go to Hoosier Philly on top.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that she is a price. I mean, if she gets bet down to 4 to 1, 7 to 2, I don't want her in this race. But I was thinking that she could be a potential value option in here. So I put her on top, just thinking Shotgun Hottie is clearly the most likely winner, but I didn't need a short price on her.
Yeah, at first glance, Pigalle seems a little light on the speed figures, but then you start going through the rest of the field. As you pointed out, this is a horse who had a lot of time off and might have improved a little bit, and maybe has one more step forward in her. So I like that she showed she can pass some horses last time out too, expecting her to be more forwardly placed in this one. 8-7-2-5 for David. I'll stack them up 5-7-4-2 in the grade 2 Locust Grove on Saturday at Churchill Downs.